All right, let's explain what we're doing here. We are going to make a four-way offset. This is assuming you already know how to make a straight offset or a one-side offset. The trick with the four-way offset is when you've started making a one-side offset, you are able to use the straight side and work off your straight side to find the diagonal length of the offset. So assume you're looking at the front of the furnace right here, and assume that this front piece was completely straight. Well, you can just find the angle off of that straight piece and get your diagonal piece for your side fitting. Well, that doesn't work when all of your sides are offset, because if you do that and you just don't get the right dimension. Your one side that you're working off has to always be straight in order for you to get that diagonal side there. So the trick is on a four-way offset, since we don't have any straight sides, we are going to create one for each side of the fitting so that we can find out what our offset is. So the way I draw my drawings for my fitting is I look at it from a bird's eye view. So this would be your upper plenum. That's the solid line. I always do I pretend I'm crawling inside the ductwork on top of the furnace, and the solid line is always the one that's closer to me, so that's my 10 by 10 upper plenum. And then this dotted line right here is the furnace below it. So I always try to do my dimensions for my plenum on these two, pick two sides that are adjacent to each other, and then my measurements for the underneath part of the fitting are on the other two adjacent sides. So this is a 10 by 10 upper plenum and an 8 by 6 furnace opening. And so I've got 3-inch offset here, two 2-inch offsets here, and one 1-inch offset right here, and our furnace is sticking out past the upper plenum, so we wanted to throw a little wrench in the works there and have it not all sit inside this other fitting. And now for the height, I always write, because you always add an inch on top and an inch on the bottom, either if you want to turn it into a slip or a drive, or if you want to fold it over an inch or fold over a hem, you fold it over half an inch and then another half an inch. So either way, you almost always have an extra inch on the top and the bottom of your fitting. So instead of writing 8 inches, I write 6 inches plus 2. That gives me my working dimensions. I can even draw this out for you. So this is your fitting as it sits, looking at it from the side. Here's your fitting. You always want this area as your working area. You don't want to add these 2 inches until the very end, because that'll throw off your angles when you're making your sides. So you always have your working area, which is 6 inches in our case right now, and then you add your 2 inches later. So what I end up doing, and I'll show you this as I start making it, I will find out what my diagonal height is. First we need to find out our vertical height, which we know is 6. Then from that we got to find out our diagonal height. Once I find that out, then I'll add my 2 inches, and I'll do that number plus 2, and then I'll cut that out, but I'll always make sure that I scribe an inch up from the bottom and an inch down from the top whenever I start making my fitting for that side. All right, let's move on to finding our angle right here. All right, so getting your sides, your angles on a fitting is a lot easier than it might seem at first. So like I said before, normally you're working off a straight side to find that angle. Well, we got to make our own straight side, and that can be done by a couple of different ways. One is, if you have a square handy, you find out what your vertical height is, and it's going to be 6 inches in all of these cases. And we also want to find out what our offset is. So let's start with our 3-inch right here. let's see, our vertical is 6 inches, our horizontal is 3. So you take your square and you take your straight edge and you find 6 right here, and you find 3 down here. Make sure you're right on the edge there, and then you read what your straight edge says. So in our case, we're at about 6 5/8 inches. So that's our length, 6 5/8. And now we don't want to forget to add 2 inches to that. So 6 5/8 plus 2 will give us 8 5/8. So 8 5/8 right there. And we'll make our mark. Now we're gonna figure out our length, just like we always do on one of these fittings. And once we're done, we're gonna scribe an inch in on this side and an inch in down here. Now, what do you do if you don't have a square handy? Well, you find a piece of metal that you believe to be 90 degrees, and we'll do the same thing as we do with a square. You just measure up 6 inches, make your mark, and it's a very small mark, you might not be able to see it on the camera. You measure over 3 inches, make a mark, and now we're going to put our straight edge right between those two marks, and we are roughly 6 5/8. So it's a little bit more accurate to do it with a square, but if you don't have a square, you can always just use a sheet of metal and do that instead. So I'm going to mark this out. We're doing the back first. So we just got our height for the back. So our width is going to be 10, and we're going to do female Pittsburghs on either side of that. So I'm going to give myself 2 extra inches. So my rough cut is going to be 12 inches wide by, what did we go with? 8 5/8 inches tall, because that's the 6 5/8 that we figured out from the square plus the 2 inches. So we'll cut this out, and by the magic of video, I'll have it cut out in 1 second. All right, so we're not going to scribe, we're going to draw solid lines so you can see it on the camera. But we've got our height now, and we've got our top and bottom scribed. Now remember, our working dimension is 6 5/8. The whole piece is 8 5/8. We don't care about the outsides yet until the end. We're only working off of these 2 lines. So if you look at our fitting, we're working on the back fitting right now. Notice that we have a 2-inch offset on either side. So we've got to make room for our Pittsburgh first. And Pittsburgh's technically 15/16 wide, but everybody I know just goes by 1 inch. It just means your final fitting grows by about 1/8 of an inch overall. So anyways, I'm gonna do 1 inch over on the side here. We'll go with our 1 inch, and I'm gonna do that on top too. It doesn't matter which inch you use. I'm gonna do 19 and 20. All right. So we're gonna start an inch in, so we have room for our Pittsburgh, however we make it. Now, looking at this picture, the top fitting is, now looking at this picture, the right side of the fitting goes in towards the bottom, so it goes out towards the top. So that means the top of our fitting, that's the solid line right there, is going to be wider than the bottom of our fitting. So the top of our fitting is 10 inches, the bottom of our fitting is 6 inches with a 2-inch offset on either side. So technically, when you're drawing your fittings, you don't have to write every offset as long as you have one per side. So we're going to start on this inch in and go 10 inches in from that. So there's 10. Make sure you make your mark on the line, not on the edge of the metal. So there's 10 inches in. Now we have a 2-inch offset coming in from the right side. So we're going to do 2 inches in for the bottom. And now we can just do 6 if we like. We don't have to worry about the offset on the other side. It's going to take care of itself once we draw our 6 inches right here. So now we draw our diagonal line. And you may find it tempting to just go an inch out here for your Pittsburgh and an inch out here for your Pittsburgh up here, but it will be slightly off if you do it that way. You have to make sure it's perpendicular to this line. So when we do our Pittsburgh, I'm going to do 1 inch here. Make sure you're going perpendicular off the line. 1 inch here. Then you're guaranteed to have a 1 inch hangover there for your Pittsburgh. That's how that's going to look, and you're going to cut that there perpendicular. You're going to cut that there perpendicular. Okay, so that's our Pittsburgh, and just for the sake of the game, we'll write Pittsburgh there. And then we've got our other offset. It's going to be an identical offset because it's 2 inches on either side. And we also want to go out an inch from that side. On plenums, I like to have my female Pittsburghs. Actually, I'm doing this backwards from what I normally do. Normally, I do it the opposite of this way. I like to have my female Pittsburghs on the sides and my male Pittsburghs on the front and back. So it's easier to take the front and back door off if you have to. So pay no attention to that my Pittsburghs are on the front, my female Pittsburghs are on the front and the back. This is a unique situation. I recommend doing it the opposite of the way I'm doing it now. But we're already underway, so we might as well keep going. I'm going to cut this out. Normally I do something like that and something like that up on top. We'll be right back. Alright, so I'm going to write B for back and set this off to the side. It's ready to go through the Pittsburgh machine. If you like to cross break it, this fitting's so small I'm not going to cross break it, but if you wish to, I usually do that before I put it through the Pittsburgh machine. I just don't like smashing down the Pittsburghs when I do that. Now we're going to move on to the front. So I'm hoping I can use the rest of this scrap piece for the front. Now the front is a little bit trickier. When you do the front fitting, you need to look at your front fitting. Pretend like you're looking at your front fitting from the inside of the plenum, which means it's as if you were hanging off of the ductwork from this side, sticking your head down through there and looking at the back, the inside of the fitting from inside the plenum here, which when you're looking at it will actually look like your fitting is upside down. And I'll show you what I mean once I make the fitting, but you're going to have to take my word for it. If you don't do it that way and you look at your fitting straight on like this, you're going to make all your folds towards you, and you're actually going to end up pretty much with another back fitting. So I'll go through the process, and then I'll kind of hold it up and show you why I say that. So let's get our next measurement. So I'm going to use a square. Our offset is 1 inch, and our height still is 6 inches. It's always going to be 6 inches on this fitting. So we'll hold this on the 6 right here and hold this on the 1. So we already know it's probably not going to be a whole lot more than 6 inches tall. And we're right. If I flip this over, it's going to be like 6 1/16. Oh, I moved. Hardly a change in our height. So, oops, let me get you into frame here. 6. There we are. Yeah, barely moved. There we go. Focus. 6 1/16. You get that? 1 inch offset down there. 6-inch vertical gives us an extra 1/16 of an inch on that fitting. So we should be able to fit that on this scrap piece. All right, so I'm going to cut out my height. 6 1/16 plus 2 gives us 8 1/16. All right, we jumped ahead a couple of steps, but I'll show you what I just did here. So remember when I said when you're doing the front fitting, that's your hardest fitting. You got to look at it as if you're sticking your head inside the plenum, and you're going to basically end up making your fitting upside down. So I'll show you what I mean. So here, our first step was we did the lines. I showed you that. And now I've got the 2 lines here, and that gives us our 1 inch, just so we can work in an inch so that when we mark out our Pittsburghs, they're not coming off of the end of the piece of metal. So we're looking at it upside down, meaning, you know, where we did our last fitting, the bottom was the smaller and the top was the larger, 10 inch. This was 6 inch. Well, we're doing it the opposite here when we lay it out. The top is going to be the 6 inch, the bottom is going to be the 10 inch, so that we make sure our right side stays on the right and our left side stays on the left. Right now, it doesn't make that much difference between the left and right measurements because they're both offset 2 inches. And I'll show you what we did here. We started an inch in, measured our top, which as we're working on it is the bottom. That's why this F is upside down. That's for front, by the way. So we moved in an inch, did our 10 inches all the way across here. Then we came down to our bottom, which is the top as we're working on it. You go in an inch, measure in for your 2 inch offset, and then that starts us right here. We measure over 6 inches, and then we do our last line, and that will give us, will automatically be 2 inches offset from the 10 inch right here, because 6 plus 2 plus 2 equals 10. Now, I will cut it out and show you why it's important to do this fitting upside down. All right, to answer your question, why do I have to build this front door upside down? I mean, when you hold it like this, it looks backwards because, if you remember, you know, our 6 inch was supposed to be on the bottom. That's where the furnace is. 10 inch was supposed to be the top. That's where the plenum is. So why am I making it upside down? Well, for one, when you're done with your fitting, you don't flip it up like this, like you would your back fitting. When you're done, you flip it like this. So because of that, now look at this. Our 10 inch is on top and our 6 inches on the bottom. I forgot to cut this notch out here. But it also keeps our right side on our right side and our left side on our left side. If you were to do it like this, and then you flip it up here, so this is your outside, and you say, oh crap, I got to spin it around. Well, now you've flipped your left and right side when you do that. So always work on it upside down, just like this. Moving on to the left and right sides. All right, we're going to pretend like we don't have a square for this one. So we'll measure our vertical height, and you can call this rise if you like. Our rise is 6 inches because it's always 6 inches on this fitting. And our run, our horizontal height, our horizontal width is 2 inches. Okay, so we just make sure that this sheet metal is square, and then we will hold this here on the edge of both sides, and it looks like we're right at 6 1/4. So 6 1/4, and we're lucky because we can use this number twice because we have a 2 inch offset on the left and a 2 inch offset on the right. So both of these, their working height is going to be 6 1/4, which means we need to cut the sheet metal at 8 1/4 because we're adding 2. All right, I'm going to give you the quick run through since you don't need the step-by-step on every fitting. I decided to do the left fitting first. Remember, we're coming in 3 inches on the bottom. That's where the furnace is. The top's hanging out 3 inches over. It's a 2 inch offset. We already figured out our height for that. And then we should be hanging over with the bottom just a little bit from over the top. So let's take a look at our drawing here. Our layout, I should say. So just to refresh, I always come in, I decided to work from the back and go this way. So I made sure I made my 1/4 inch mark, because we're doing the male Pittsburghs on the sides, which again, don't ever make a furnace fitting like this. Always do your male Pittsburghs on the front and back. But anyways, so this dotted line here is showing you where we're starting from. We don't start from the edge because we don't want to hang over with this male Pittsburgh. So because the top is wider, it's 10 inches, the bottom's only 8. I'm starting with the top here, and the top is right on the edge of that dotted 1/4 inch line. 10 inches that way, and then here we have our 3-inch offset from the back, so we're 3 inches in to the inside line. I didn't draw the outside line yet. I did the inside line first, and then I went 8 inches this way, and now we can connect our lines. Your offset, you don't care. We don't care about our 1-inch offset. It's going to automatically happen because of what we're drawing here. So once you have the inside lines done, then you want to remember to hold your straight edge perpendicular. The bigger the angle, the more important this will be. So you hold your straight edge at a 90-degree angle from your line, and mark 1/4 inch, and then draw your 1/4 inch line there. Do the same with this. So then once I got those marked out and these marked out, we're all set. I'll cut it out and we'll go to the next one. Okay, we got very lucky on this one. That's your left fitting. This is our right. They're both exactly the same height. Remember we said the height can be the same? Well, because they are both exactly, they're mirror images of each other. They both have the 3-inch offset in the back and the 1 inch on the front. All we really have to do is take this fitting, flip it over, make sure that the insides of the fittings face each other. And now we can just trace out this fitting right here. The angle on this side is already exactly the same, so we'll just trace out the rest of it, and we'll make a mirror image of this one. You can't always do this, but if all the measurements are identical, there's no sense in measuring out a second fitting if you can trace the first one. Just got to make sure it's a mirror image so you don't end up with 2 rights or 2 lefts. So here we are, traced out. I'm going to cut this out, and then I'll fold everything up, and I'll see if there's any tips for you on folding. We're probably not going to go through the whole folding process. We'll do a different video if you need on that, but I'll show you a couple extra tricks. When I fold these, the bottoms, I'm going to fold a 1/2 inch over and smash it flat, and then I'll fold it over again 90 degrees so this sits inside. It's going to be a 1/2 inch once I'm done with it, but I've doubled up the metal so it's thicker, it doesn't bend as much on you, it doesn't cut you. That's what I do on all the sides except for the front, usually, unless you need to do something different for a different situation. I do almost the same with the front. I fold it over here, but then I'll flip it over and fold it out in the front so I can put a couple screws in from the front side. So I'll show you what I mean when I'm all done with the fitting. Also, I like to plan ahead a little bit sometimes. So notice how our front sticks out on the bottom. So this is our front fitting. So if we flip it around, it's going to be, instead of being 90 degrees, it's going to stick out a little bit on the furnace side. So I'm going to plan on putting the top in slips. So I'm going to crease this a little bit. Not a 90-degree angle, but just bend it up a little bit before I do any of the other stuff. It doesn't matter as much with this. This, you can put it through the Pittsburgh machine first and then do that. Well, let's say, for instance, on the left and right. This is the left side. The left side is going to be going out. So I'll bend this up this way before I bend my 90-degree bends, because this you don't have to worry about smashing down as much when you're doing your 90 degrees. But once you bent these in, it may be tricky to bend to get this angle the way you want it. So any of my bends that are under 90 degrees, I usually try to do those first if I can, so that you're not smashing down a 90-degree angle that you've already bent up. So kind of have in mind what your fitting is going to look like, what your side is going to look like once you're done with it, and try to get those bent up. You can always do it afterwards with a bar folder, but if you can do it ahead of time, it saves you a lot of trouble, and it looks a lot neater. I'll show you what I mean when I say I'm going to bend this up first. So I know my sides are going to be out like this, so I want to bend this up. So I'm going fast, so see if you can keep up. I'm just going to give it a little nudge. See? So now when it sits out like this, it's got that part that's already folded up. So I'll fold this over now too. Smash it down. And now we just want to work our way around the fitting. So we'll start on this side. This is so you don't have to move over to the other end of the brake. Start on the 1/4 inch. And we'll let that hang over the edge a little. And we'll do our 1/2 inch. 90 degrees. Actually, remember, this is going to be like this, so we probably didn't have to go quite 90. So if you make that mistake, you can smash it a little bit flat. Now we came back to less than 90. And now back to the 3rd side. There you go. Now you got the one fitting, so it's ready to go for one side. All right, here's our folded and pounded together 4-way miniature 4-way offset fitting. See what I mean about when you use 1 inch for your female Pittsburghs? You see that dotted line? We're about 1/16 of an inch off on both sides. So just keep in mind, use 15/16 for your female Pittsburghs, or just expect that you're going to be 1/8 of an inch wide overall on your fitting when you're done with it. So all these folds I made as I was working. On the female Pittsburgh side, you can do your Pittsburghs first and then do that crease. And it's not so much, being the perfect angle. It's just getting that crease in there so that you can work it with a bar folder later if you need to. Same with the bottom. I did those creases. I tried to get them as close as I could, to the angle that they needed to be. Is there anything else I need to tell you? No, it's not as hard as you might think. All you need to do is, instead of working off a flat side, remember, you just have to figure out a way to make your own flat side and work off of that side. So whether you use a square or a piece of metal that has a 90-degree angle, just go over for your run, which is your offset, and then however tall you need to be for your rise. In our case, it's 6 inches. And we can double check that now by holding our straight edge vertically on this fitting, and right there at that crease is our 6 inches. And then our +2 is this inch up here that we are going to tuck into a slip, and this inch down here, which we ended up folding a 1/2 inch over and smashing it flat, and then folding another 1/2 inch over. That keeps it nice and rigid instead of just doing 1/2 inch. If you're the type of person that would like to just fold over a 1/2 inch, I don't think it's as good of a result, but then you're only going to be adding 1.5 inches as opposed to 2 inches to your total measurement. So I hope you found that helpful. Good luck out there.